This is to honor her and her husband, Kenneth, and most of you would know him as Peanut. They brought racing to this area. Really, Winchester was the only track going at the time. They brought the first track from the McMinnville area, then Sparta came along and Crossville and so on and so forth. But Gilda and her husband actually brought racing to this area, and I can't thank her enough. She watched a lot of us grow up, and she can't understand how we got so old, but something happened to us along the way. So Gilda, would you say a few words for us?
Kenneth and Gilda Cantor went to high school together. Kenneth had a Jeep and then got a slick Studebaker. Gilda went to a drive-in one time. She was slipped in the trunk of a car. A car pulled up beside them and Kenneth got out and helped her out. They got married in 1955. Gilda was still in high school. She was so smart she'd already finished high school, but she wanted to stay one more year so she could graduate with her class. After Kenneth got out of school, Kenneth went into service and he went to Alaska. That's where Kenneth started racing. When Kenneth got back home, he started racing at Winchester from 1957 to 1958. Kenneth and Gilda brought dirt track racing to the McMinnville area. I think Randall kind of stole my line right there. In 1960, they decided to build a track that was located by the river next to the VFW in McMinnville, Tennessee. The first race was in September 1960. The first race, Bobby and Donnie Allison, and Red Farmer was there. Marty Robbins also ran there several times. Cuckoo Marlin, too. Gilda outlawed the multi-numbered cars because it was too hard to keep up with the score. And as the other tracks opened in the Upper Cumberland, Gilda would go and show them how to do the scoring. The rules every week was the same. And you knew what you'd get every week. Unlike today, the rules would be like this one week, and then they'd change to the next week. And the first time we went down there to Miss Cantrell's, I'll never forget. We went in there, and I looked on TV, and guess what she was watching? A race from Daytona International Speedway. I thought it was close enough, sorry. But anyway, when I was listening to Gilda and watching her, and I told Gilda this earlier, I'm glad I wasn't a driver back then. Of course, I never drove a car. I'm glad I wasn't a driver back then because I think I'd have been afraid of her. And on that note, Gilda, it's my extreme pleasure to present this to you and your late husband, Kenneth Cantrell, for everything that you all done for racing in the Upper Cumberland. And it's safe to say, I think, if it wouldn't been for you and your late husband, we probably wouldn't be here celebrating today.
I wish we could be here just to be here and see what has happened since we built a track. And we built it because there was nothing else to do in this area. Winchester had a track, so we thought we wanted one. We raced on one night and they raced on the next day, whichever way it went. And then Sparta got a track, and tracks started coming up everywhere. Little dirt tracks. With you guys building cars and wanting something to do, and you did. So we feel like we started something that people are going to enjoy the rest of their life. such an honor, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Gilda. One other story I'll have to share. I know now why Earl Lawrence went from 414 to 14. Gilda gave him the choice of either being 41 or 14. So he wound up 14. And thank you, Gilda. Our next inductee will be Don Hobbs, and his daughter is here, if she would come down. I don't know if you ever met her mother or not, but she's a real duplicate. She could not deny who her mother was. But at her age, they looked extremely alike. But I've got to tell one Don Hobbs story, and I'm going to ask Gary to tell another one here in a minute. And Gary's dad is involved in this story real heavily. At the time this happened, this was at the first old Sparta Speedway, first Speedway that Sparta ever had. You was allowed we was running flatheads, you were allowed a 60 overbore engine. Don got Earl to build an engine for him, and he said, all I wanted to do if I win and get protested, I want to be sure it passes inspection. What Earl did, he stamped all the pistons 80 over. Sure enough, as it would have it, Don won the feature, and he got protested. And there was that big 80 looking up at everybody when it was supposed to be a 60. They finally decided, well, let's check it, because Don swore it was right. He said, I know it was right. I paid it to be right. Earl built it. It's got to be right. Well, the guy checked it. It was right, but it was still stamped 80 over. You can't get an 80 over in a 60 hole, but they didn't believe the guy that was checking the things. Somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, I guess Gary will have to verify this, they actually did call Earl to verify if the motor was legal or not. They wasn't taking anybody's word for it. Don't know why they took Earl's word for it either. But they did, and Don was legal. And that'll always be one of my favorite Don Hobbs stories. Now, Gary has got one he's going to share with us here.
When I grew up, Don was there every night. They started out in the back room of our house, building motors before we had a garage. They was working on something. Every time when they would get a new cam or something or other, they just do that there, they board it, polished, and they done this and that. And when I was about 7 years old, I'd have to go to bed, and they'd carry on. So they got one together. We went to the racetrack. That was out at my level. And Jay wanted to try that the first heat race. And so they had to change his cam, put another cam in it. So Don told him, Dad said, now, you give me about 2 or 3 laps, let me get this thing strung out. And he said, I want most of you come on. He said, now, if you got anything, you come on. He said, we'll see what this new cam does. So they run 3 or 4 laps. They had down the back straightaway, and Don stayed on that motion to come on. Well, then he got back away from him. He got, I guess, a running shot at him, because he run up on him, and just as they got to the turn, I don't know what happened. Don touched the brakes or something, and he hit him back in. Well, they had just put up new signs out there around that southern track. I think it was a River North sign, just as got it put up. Don went over the bank right through that sign, and on the sign to all left was 2 posts sticking up. Went out the parking lot out there, so, well, we got it back to the pit and tried to get straightened up what was on, and I was trying to straighten the axle up some of it. And Don's mother, Timmy, and she come down to the pit, and she straightened them 2 guys out. she was very unhappy with it. So that's what happened when you start trying something out, you new. But they made it. They got out of it.
It gives me pleasure like you wouldn't believe, having known Don like I did. When we went to the fairground in Nashville to race, we went together. We went at the same time. There's lots of stories I can tell you about that. But welcome to the Upper Cumberland Hall of Fame. I hope you'll accept this for you, Dad. It's well deserved. could spend the rest of the afternoon telling non-Hobbs and Earl Orient stories. The thing is, they would all be true. The next inductee is Houston Montgomery. Houston he was a car owner, a car builder, innovator. He thought way ahead of his time. He was, I used to be, I called myself his substitute driver. Every time somebody didn't show up, I got to drive the car, and I loved driving cars for Houston. He understood early on the value of lightweight, left side weight. He also understood cam timing real well to get you off the turn good. But anyway, Gene Wood was, I guess, one of his last drivers. And I guess we drove enough alike that I just wear Gene's helmet. Nobody could tell us apart or who was driving the car. So we drove the car a lot alike, I guess. But I've got Gene up here that I was going to say a few words about Houston. And we have Houston's daughters here to accept his plaque in just a few moments. We got Cynthia and Melissa here.
Girls want to come on up. These are Houston's daughters, Melissa and Cynthia. Then we have Scott Shelton. So first of all, I'm honored to be doing this for Houston and Houston's family. A long history with my father in Houston. I'm just thrilled that he's going in. So anyway, Houston, you know, he was a racing guy. A lot of you guys are familiar with Houston. I think Houston's interest in racing probably started racing bicycles, would you say? At the old track behind the Dipsy Doodle on Highway 70. Drag race motorcycles as well. And then he got involved with, I think, a guy named Mark Livingston in Allgood. Houston would ride his bicycle to whoever he knew was going to the racetrack to race. He would ride his bicycle and catch a ride with him. And a funny story, I was told this story. They were going to Monticello, Kentucky to race. It was in the spring of the year. They didn't have room for Houston in the truck, so he had to ride in the race car from Allgood all the way to Monticello, Kentucky. So the ride up there was great, but the ride coming home, it got cold. It was like freezing cold. So when they got back to Allgood, they got out and they walked back to check on Houston, and they said, "Houston, are you doing okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm doing fine. I qualified fourth. I ran second in the heat. I won the consolation race, and I had to pull off the track with a flat tire in the feature." So, great story. But I know that Lynn Slager's here. Lynn used to drive for Houston. Scott Shelton's here. And my father, I think all three of those guys owe a lot of their success to Houston. So I'm thrilled that he's going in. I'm thrilled all the other 7 or 8 inductees are going in. A lot of great people that have contributed to racing. Also want to thank the 2 Bobby Ballew's daughters for what they're doing, researching all the stuff in the Livingston Enterprise, I think it is, and posting that. That's great racing history. But anyway, I would like to introduce Melissa and Cynthia and accept this plaque for your dad going into the 2023 Upper Cumberland Racing Hall of Fame.
Hey, I'm Scott Shelton, for you guys that don't know me. Steel Race was fortunate enough to be Houston's last driver before he passed away back in the 4-cylinder days. Cindy called me last night and asked me to say a few words, and I was thinking how to portray Houston Montgomery to people that may not have knew him. Eugene had a great story of how he got started. I was there for the latter years of that. So I set my 8-year-old son down, who also runs the 5M number that I do, and the M is for Montgomery, and explained to him where that came from. And the best thing that I could come up about Houston was he had a way of thinking. It wasn't a way that he worked on cars or a way that he fixed stuff or a way that he built engines. It was the way he approached problems. When it came to a race car, there was never a problem that didn't have a solution. and there wasn't a part on that race car you couldn't make better. And losing wasn't an option. I got my butt chewed for running second place so bad on the way home from nice that me and him would test each other when we got home and get up and get to work in the shop the next morning. But he had, anybody that knew him back in the day, everybody looked up to him. And when I first met him, I had no clue about the history of where he came from and what he was involved with. And as I got through the next 4 or 5 years driving it, he made me look like a heck of a race car driver that I definitely was not, because anybody could drive those race cars. They were so good. Anybody that was around him, he made an impression, and that stuck with me forever. And those impressions, sitting here today, telling these stories with all you guys that are here, back in the 70s and 60s and 50s, when all this got started, our motorsports and our history was being developed, it wasn't on YouTube, it wasn't on Facebook, it wasn't, I mean, sometimes it was in the newspapers, but those aren't still there. So these stories you hear today, go home and tell somebody, tell the next generation, tell the 8-year-olds still racing, where those come from, what your grandpas did. Because if we don't, this will die. And we can't let that happen. So that's all I've got. And on behalf of the family, I really thank you guys for doing this. Thank Mike and all you guys on the board for coming here and putting this together. It's an amazing, amazing thing that gets to happen. But like I said, go home. Don't let our history die. Don't let our sport die. Appreciate you guys. Thank you guys again.
Now, there's one other thing that the listener, Cynthia's reminded me of. Houston had this saying about his cars and his drivers. He didn't come to participate in races. He came to win. And he gave you something to win with every time you sat out in that car. You might always do it, but it wasn't because you weren't sitting in a car that was capable of doing it. His cars were winners anywhere you put them. And thank you too for being here. Thank you for allowing us to put Houston in the Hall of Fame. Our next inductee is Jimmy Nyland. Now, Jimmy is still, he's still active in racing. He's been a track promoter, I guess owner. I know he promoted a lot of racing, but I've had the pleasure of getting to race with Jimmy myself, and he's still doing it. I don't know how much, but he's still doing it some, and Marty is here to present that.
So like Randall said, Jimmy's not here today. He had some things that he had to take care of today. We wish that they could have been here, but Jimmy was born January 5th, 1946. He started racing and won his first race in 1971 at Winchester Speedway. He won the very first feature race at Duck River Speedway in 1973. He was the track champion at Winchester Speedway in 1972. He was the track champion at Duck River Speedway in 2019 at 73 years old. He was promoter at Duck River from 1985 to 1990, and he was the promoter at Winchester Speedway from 2009 to 2016. And he does still race today at the age of 77. He'll be 78 in January. But like I said, they didn't get to make it today, so we'll accept his plaque and we'll get it down there to him, and we're going to hold it hostage until he does a podcast with us.
And you can bet on that. Jack Smith. Jack has been a long time friend, and Jack is here. Jack has raced all over the country. He's been a forward-thinking racer. And one of the things that I'll share with you, by all practical reason and purposes, Jack shouldn't be allowed to still be alive, because he had a crash at the Nashville Speedway that is unbelievable, but he walked away from it without a scratch. He destroyed one of the most beautiful race cars at the time that I had ever seen. And Jack's got, to me, he could have made a cup racer. He was that good. Everything that Jack set out in, he could drive it. Like the rest of us, he might have lost a few races, but Jack Smith was a good driver. And besides that, he was a good man. We're lucky enough, too, to have his old mechanic, Bobby Bogard, that's here. Bobby, wave at us, let people know who you are. And It's very unusual this day and time to have a racing team that is still together. Jack and Bobby were a good team. Bobby taught at the trade school in McMinnville. So did Jack. Jack's been a great teacher and been a real active guy and still is physically active. So, Jack, would you like to say a few words to us? I'll let Jack tell his story.
You know, it's funny how your heroes when you were little can be right under your nose and you not realize it. When we started doing the podcast, brought back the Hall of Fame, I told Randall, I said, Jack Smith needs to be in the Hall of Fame. Where's he at? Randall said, I don't know, but I'll get you a phone number. He got me a phone number and I called Jack. Jack lived 2 miles from me. Small world, ain't it? Jack was born 9/24/36. He was a Christmas baby. He went to high school at Nashville Central. He played football, track and field, and participated in pole vault. He got his BS degree from MTSU in 1962. He attended University of Tennessee, got his MS degree. He served 35 years, Tennessee Department of Education, he was a teacher for 28 counties. And here's Mr. Jack Smith.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Bobby Bogart. You notice when I walked up here, I was carrying something. That's that bucket of memories that we've all got. Let's run back down here so Steve and Randall have stirred them. I'm 87 years old and they were beginning to fade a little. And these guys got involved and that bucket has shook and run over and continues to bubble because of the stirring of those memories with the things that they do, like this right here. I go to bed at night and I think about this race and that race and the time me and Bobby went to Maryville and it was a long race and a protest and we got home about daylight the next morning coming down that hill going into Sparta and the old crooked bouncing around. All those memories, I could talk to you all day about them. They're in my mind and they're of value. They are wonderful. When you get to be 87 years old, that's mostly what you got is your memories. The kids talk about these old people, all they want to talk about, my grandson says, is the way things used to be. And that's the story with me. But the way things used to be with me was that 12 years between 25 and 37 that we ran that old race car all over the country. All over the country. Started at McMinnville, Winchester, Duck River. One time we were running Friday night at Sparta, Saturday night at Buffalo Valley, and I'd go up in East Tennessee, Tazewell, and run on Sunday afternoon. I mean, we worked on them, grease from our armpits to our knees, come home and start working on them again. Go racing them, drag them home, and start racing them again. But it was a wonderful part of my life. 12 years saved my life. I'd gotten out of school, gotten a job, had a little money in my pocket, got me a motorcycle. Hit a car head on North Chancery Street coming out of McMinnville, went over the car, turning flips, come down about 20 feet behind it, got a bruised heel out of it. Got in a race car, run all over the country, hit the wall in Nashville and upside down, flying through the air, come down on the top, crawled out and waved at the crowd. It's been a wonderful experience, and I thank you, and I thank you for stirring it for me and keeping it alive, and we just need to do it for each other, guys. It's what we got, and it carries us on. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you again, guys. Thank you all.
Jack, on behalf of the Upper Cumberland Racing Hall of Fame, welcome to the Hall of Fame 2023.
I got my memories with that there or not. Very good.
Guys, our next inductee is, most everybody has heard about this because he's been sort of a colorful character throughout the years. I learned early on to not let him get in front of you because it makes it impossible to pass him. So the best thing to do anything you had to keep him behind him. Use all the track that was there if you had to. But Mike Luna here is he's gonna say a few words about Doug and where is Doug. Come on up and see us, Doug. Mike.
Hey, I just want to thank everybody for being here. There's a big hole in all our hearts today. But Doug, he's special, so special. I started my racing career in his lap. I'd sit in his lap and pack the racetrack, and he'd mash the gas and brake because I couldn't reach him, and I'd steer the car. And couldn't wait to get to the racetrack on Saturday night, and he'd let me do that. But he started racing in the hobby class in '74, and then in the late models in '76. He didn't race much after 1980s. He started Hoosier Dirt South in '79 up until he sold it in 2000. He bought 411 in 1986, paved it in 1993, sold it in 1997, bought it back in 2006. He also owned Crossfield twice, Florence, Atomic, I-75, Tennessee Motor Speedway. He's responsible for a whole lot of racing history here. He knows everybody pretty much that's ever raced. And, Doug's my hero, and it's my pleasure to induct him into the Upper Cumberland Racing Hall of Fame of 2023. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mike. That's making me feel real old here because, he used to sit in my lap when we packed the track, so you know how it is. But anyway, I'm glad to see it. And I think because I'm getting inducted, y'all had bigger crowds and and everybody heard it was me, so they said, hell with it, we're not coming. But anyway, there's some people here that's pretty special to me. There's a guy that helped me put my first race car together, G.L. Welcher, and his son sitting over here. Stephanie and Jeff. Don Hobbs was probably the drugs that made me get into this stuff. And of course, Gary, he always thought he was a lot younger than me when we were all hanging out at the service station, but really, he's not much younger. Just letting everybody know. But I'm glad that my sister finally showed up for something. She never went and watched me race. I got my niece, my wife, and my great nephews and niece here, so they're all here, so I'm proud they're here. Got some more people I know around here and there and talking about congratulations to Houston Montgomery. I raced against him a lot. And also, he helped me at the end of my career a little bit. So it's good to see all of this, that what Mike and Steve and Gary and you too, Randall, have put together, because this is something important that we need to carry on. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and I appreciate the honor. And we'll go from there. Thanks.
Welcome to the Upper Cumberland Hall of Fame. You deserve it. Well, this guy has literally been into every facet of racing that you can think of. And I don't know if you got that or not, but the first laps around the racetrack in a race car that Mike Luna ever did was sitting in his lap. So if Mike was good, I guess it's a lot of Doug's fault. So thank you, Doug, for that. Congratulations. Carter, I've got to say one more thing. Doug is never recorded.
Now, what I'm gonna say is, whole thing should be about Jeff Walker. You know, Jeff was, you know, he did the podcast with me a few weeks ago. And also, you know, Jeff was always around when I first started racing. And so, I mean, he was a good friend and a big loss.
Jeff indeed was a pleasure to work with.